Hi there, Kendra Tolbert here. I'm a registered dietitian and yoga teacher specializing in PCOS, women's health, and fertility. And today I have a very special interview for you. It's an interview with Caitlin Johnson. Caitlin Johnson is a fellow dietitian and all around lovely human. She specializes in PCOS and she uses fertility awareness and cycle tracking to help her clients get pregnant. So she's going to tell us all about some of the mistakes and myths that exist around fertility awareness and how you, if you have PCOS, can use cycle tracking to identify your fertile window. She'll also tell us what all of that means. So let's go ahead and dive right into that interview. So, Caitlin, thank you so much for being here. It's definitely like deep honors. I'm excited to have you.
Well, I'm honored anytime I get a chance to talk to you. And I just love serving this community. I mean, I don't think that there's enough that we can do to help women kind of in the PCOS world and the fertility world. So thanks for asking me to come on your YouTube channel. This is so fun. This is kind of my foray into YouTube. I've never really done it before. So
Oh, welcome. Welcome.
yeah.
Very good. Very good. So I know you as an amazing dietitian and podcaster and just like lovely, compassionate human. But I'd love to hear from you in your own words. Who are you? What do you do? And maybe most importantly, why do you do it?
Yeah. Well, my name is Caitlin Johnson. I am a dietitian, but kind of in the PCOS world, I always want people to know more importantly that I have PCOS and I've really fought in my life to have health and manage my PCOS and struggled through infertility. And so a lot of what I do professionally is because I have a real strong passion for women that are kind of walking a similar path that I walked. But as just a human, I'm married. I have two beautiful babies. I live in California, at least at this point in time. That may change sometime in the future. And I just love good food. And like, I kind of became a dietitian because I wanted to be able to eat good food my whole life, not good, like healthy. Like, I want food to taste good. What is life if food doesn't taste good? And how could I live a healthy life and like put that together? Um, so that's really intertwined into how I work with women and try to support them is that they can still enjoy and love the lives that they lead and the food that they eat and support their body and work with their hormones. So yeah, that's a lot of why I do what I do. I went into becoming a dietitian. I went into my marriage thinking like my PCOS was really under control. And then I still struggled with infertility. And so as I really started working with women with PCOS, I just found that I had a passion for this group of women, not just in managing their PCOS, but that were trying to get pregnant and not just get pregnant, but have healthy pregnancies and become moms and have and grow their family. So that's really like what I live and breathe every single day is helping women do that.
Oh, I love it. It definitely comes through. Like when I'm on your Instagram, I feel it. I definitely feel it. It's more than just
I'm
a
really
career.
thankful for Instagram. Yeah, it's such a great way to connect with people. I wouldn't probably know you at least this right at this moment if it hadn't been for Instagram. So, yeah.
Cool. Oh, I love it. Okay. So, in addition to nutrition, you actually talk about something that I find incredibly interesting. You talk a lot about cycle charting, fertility awareness, and properly identifying the fertile window. I'd love it if you would tell us
Mhm.
exactly what are those things? Like what is FAM? What is all of that?
Yeah, and I have to say most of my training, at least to this date, has been self-training. Like when I was struggling to conceive, I read every book I could get my hands on. And I think kind of like the book Bible of fertility awareness method for a long time is, to now might feel a little outdated and there's a lot more resources. But fertility awareness method, I think people think of it as like a a way to naturally avoid pregnancy when I look at it from the completely opposite lens. It's just a way of you to get to know your body and how it communicates to you so that you can clearly and accurately determine when are you fertile and when are you not. And then depending on what your life goals are, you can then take that information and apply it in your lifestyle the way that would serve you. So, accurately identifying what we call your fertile window, when you could actually conceive and get pregnant, knowing that if you're trying to conceive, like that's when you want to make time and really prioritize having sex to get pregnant. If your choice is to try to not get pregnant, accurately knowing that can give you a lot of freedom in having ownership around when you want to build your family and use a different method of preventing pregnancy in that period of time or just abstaining from pregnancy. Fertility awareness method is really it's not as complicated as I think it comes across. And people think like, oh, I gotta have all these graphs and all these charts, and I need to have a thermometer, and I'll explain what all those things do for you in a second. But like if you can something that I hear Lisa Hendrickson Jack say all the time. She has an awesome podcast called Fertility Friday. She says if you can brush your teeth in the morning and in the evening, you can learn to track your cycle
Mm.
and be in much more control of kind of your fertility future. And that really speaks to me because most people can commit to brushing their teeth in the morning and in the evening. Um, right? Like, yeah, maybe less during quarantine. We're not actually seeing people face to face, or when we are, we're masked up. But part of why I really brought this into my practice and why I talk about it a lot in my public platforms is because it's not something that we were really taught in sex ed, at least in fourth grade when they split the boys up and the girls up in the school I went to. We went and learned about how sex could get you pregnant and basically that it could get you pregnant anytime that you did it, which is not true. That, the things that we already knew, boys had penises and girls had vaginas, how to use a condom. Like I remember the banana and the teacher very uncomfortably wrapping a condom around it. Like the things I was taught actually had very little to do with me having literacy about my own body. And that is really problematic because you can't get pregnant every day in your cycle. And specifically for a PCOS gal who may have a really long cycle, um, you have one opportunity in any cycle for you to ovulate. And around that ovulation window, you have a few days that you could potentially get pregnant. Understanding when that's coming and the way your body kind of gives you like the coming attraction, the preview of that is really important. Understanding how to confirm that is really important. So if you are trying to conceive, you're not just like having all the sex for 60 or 90 days if you have a really long cycle and killing yourself at that and your partner, and then being really let down when your period comes again. So at its root, cycle tracking and kind of this fertility awareness method, understanding your fertile windows, is a way for a woman to interpret the messages that their body is sending them to tell them when they are fertile. And a lot of times I'll get messages online that's like, how do am I ovulating? And I'm like, well, let me ask you a few questions. Are you tracking your basal body temperature? But do you ever see cervical mucus? Do you know what that is? Like I'm not a period fairy. I don't have magical powers. I can't tell you that, but I can help you interpret data that you every single day can gather about yourself and be able to confidently answer that question and then confidently time sex around that, so that we can give you the best shot at pregnancy. Because you even in a very long cycle, if you are ovulating, you still have a chance at pregnancy.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
I love that you just said confidently because it feels like
mhm,
a lot of the women that I've worked with, there is a lack of confidence because they
mhm,
have been
kind of coached in a way to distrust their body, distrust the
Mhm.
signs from their body, and think that everything has to come from outside of them. And so, what you provide people is with an opportunity to know the language of their body and to like
Yes.
listen to it. And I love that so much.
Yes, and that's what you just said is crucial. It's like learning a new language.
Yeah.
And it's things that you may be disconnected from because of what opportunities you were given to manage your PCOS very early on. If the solution when you were 14 or 16 or 19 or 25, when your periods went missing or you had really bad acne or your hair was falling out and they just gave you birth control, one of the fertile signs that we have is cervical mucus. It's the mucus that your cervix actually makes and secretes. We'll pretend this is your cervix and these are your vaginal walls. It secretes it and it comes down your vaginal walls and literally, usually outside of you at different points in your cycle. And birth control, any real type of hormonal contraceptive, whether it's a shot or a hormonal IUD or birth control pill, is going to shut down your body making this fertile cervical mucus. So, a lot of times I'll have women come see me. They're recently off of some sort of hormonal contraceptive, and I start talking about cervical mucus. Have you ever seen this kind of like creamy or snotty type fluid coming out of you? And they're like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then a month or two later, they're like, oh, I saw it for the first time. And part of that's just you've had something in your system that's kind of shut down this process that your body naturally would do otherwise. And I took a picture of my cervical mucus a couple months ago and showed it on my stories on Instagram. And so many women were like, thank you. Like, I hear egg white, I hear snot like, and I try to look for pictures of it on the internet. Then I had a couple people write and be like, this is really gross. I can't believe that you showed this. And my response to them was, I really respect that. But I think the problem is that we find this incredibly natural, healthy, kind of like, in my opinion, magical power thing that our body does with fertile cervical mucus gross that we can't even talk about it. Like, it's not gross to see somebody use a tissue and, blow their nose. We don't run from the room when somebody does that. But to talk about this incredibly in just like miraculous fluid our body makes every month that can help us get pregnant, like, that's gross. That's what's sad to me, is that anyone would even consider that that's gross. It's incredible. um so yeah, so cervical mucus is probably one of the best previews your body gives you at knowing it's trying to ovulate. Ovulation is coming. It doesn't confirm ovulation, but it gives you an idea that your body's like revving up and it's trying to ovulate. So, right after a period, so menstrual flow, blood flow, you kind of have very little cervical mucus and it will start kind of building. It'll go from like kind of like I want to say Bali. But like if you were to take old lotion and kind of like ball it up, it would look like that. Then it kind of turns creamy and then it turns a little bit more wet. And then eventually it starts looking like egg white or like clear snot. And it becomes kind of stringy and it will spring back and forth if you hold it between your fingers. A lot of times you'll see people going like this, and I can't not talk with my hands. So that's what I'm doing. When you see that, that is like primo, super fertile cervical mucus. And why I mentioned that I feel like this is like a miraculous or magical fluid is because this mucus has potential in it to keep sperm alive inside of you for up to 5 days. So when your body makes it, it's telling you, I'm trying to ovulate, and this is the time to get it on, guys, because sperm can live inside of you for 5 days. And you will see typically that this peak cervical mucus will show up 3 days, 5 days, maybe 2 days before ovulation typically takes place. So it's a really valuable sign that your body is giving you that it's trying to ovulate. And it gives you a kind of head start on ovulation predictor kits. Ovulation predictor kits aren't very reliable in PCOS, but they do work for some women. they predict ovulation within 36 hours. Sperm can live inside of you for way longer than a day and a half. So, following your cervical mucus, you might get an additional 3-ish,
Mhm.
almost 4 days that you could have sex and potentially have a chance at conception if we're looking for and following your cervical mucus and not just relying on tests. Um, so that's probably my favorite of the things that you can learn about, because if you knew nothing else, even if we couldn't confirm ovulation, if you just started timing sex when you saw fertile cervical mucus, you would have more of a chance at pregnancy than if you were just shooting in the dark or relying on ovulation predictor kits.
Okay, so that perfectly segues into my next question. So you do this quite a bit. You walk your clients through this quite a bit. So what are like the three biggest mistakes that you see people making before they come to work with you when it comes to cycle tracking?
Yeah, some of the biggest mistakes that I see are so some of this just takes education about what a cycle is, right? Day 1 of your cycle is the first day that you have like a period flow that you have to do something about it. So it's not if you wipe and you see a little bit of blood tinged toilet paper or a little like dark brown discharge. The day that you have to put a tampon in, a menstrual cup, put on a pad on your panties, that is day 1 of your period. So the first mistake that I see people do is they just track day 1 of their period to day 1 of their next period. Okay. So they have an idea of their cycle length. They don't really know anything about what happens in between. So that's kind of mistake number one is just not gathering more data. And it's not a mistake like you're wrong for doing it. Typically, it's just you've never been taught that there's more to look at.
Mhm.
I'd say that the second biggest mistake I see is over relying on ovulation predictor kits. And that becomes a bigger mistake because women with PCOS have higher levels of a hormone at baseline called luteinizing hormone. It's one of the hormones that kind of has like a delicate symphony that it goes through for it to stimulate ovulation. Kind of floats early in your cycle, kind of in the low range, and then it spikes really high, basically it sends a signal to force your ovary to send out a follicle and ovulate. And we tend to have 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a normal value of luteinizing hormone. So you're peeing on a stick that's testing for high levels of luteinizing hormone. And, Jane PCOS doe always has 3 to 4 times the amount. So she's going to see afternoon that she's tracking her urine to look for ovulation, and she's seeing over and over and over again that she's about to ovulate. And that can be problematic for a number of reasons. First of all, I've never seen somebody almost about to ovulate 15, 20 days in a row it like and ovulate that many times. You only ovulate one time in your cycle. If you're ovulating that many times, it would be a mystery why you're not pregnant yet. Um, but what I see happen is you're testing that, you're timing sex around that, you're getting frustrated with that, and then maybe you just stop testing because you're 30 or 40 days into your cycle. Meanwhile, your body's still trying to ovulate. And so sometimes you do end up ovulating like day 50 of your cycle. But by that point, you've had all the sex, you're really tired, you don't trust that you could even ovulate anymore, and you again miss your fertile window. So we're not listening to the cervical mucus, we're relying on this test that on the literal test kits themselves, they say that they're not reliable for women with PCOS. So that's I would say, the second big mistake that I see. The third big mistake that I see is more related to basal body temperature tracking. And this is something that I haven't really brought up yet, but is kind of a critical piece of fertility awareness method. We're looking for a temperature shift that happens in a woman's cycle to confirm that ovulation has happened. So when you ovulate, your body sends out the egg from your ovary, and then there's this it's almost like the envelope the egg was sitting in before you ovulated, and this hangs out behind. And It's called the corpus luteum. And it actually is like a temporary little organ your body makes. It's an endocrine organ. It sends out hormones. It's this incredible thing that happens. And it sends out hormones. The main one is progesterone. And that tells your body, hang on to the uterine lining. I just gave you an egg. In case we get pregnant, you need to like hang out and be there for longer than 14 days. Okay. So it will send out progesterone. This progesterone is like, it tells your body to raise its baseline temperature. It's like putting the hen sitting on the eggs or a duck sitting on the eggs so that it has an optimal temperature for cells to divide, because you need this like very narrow range of temperatures for it to be safe for a baby to implant in your uterine lining, for the cells to divide, for the placenta to develop, for all these beautiful things that need to happen. So this temperature shift that happens tells us that ovulation occurred. And you can look at charts and very confidently say, like, I just looked at one this morning with the patient. She ovulated Wednesday. And then we looked at her chart and we saw when she had sex around Wednesday. And I can tell her based on that, you even have a shot at pregnancy or not. Like, oh, you had sex last Thursday. You didn't have sex again until this Thursday. We don't have a lot in that 5 days before that the cervical mucus would have kept your sperm alive inside your body. And we have one intercourse within maybe 24 hours of when ovulation. You have a chance, but it's a smaller chance. So the big mistake that I see is people looking for that temperature shift and then having sex after the temperature shift. The temperature shift comes, indicates ovulation happened, but the shift shows us that ovulation already happened. And sperm can live inside of you for 5 days before ovulation, but your egg can only live for about a day after you ovulate. So you have a 6-day window every single cycle that you could have sex and potentially get pregnant. You're going to have better shot at pregnancy if the sex shows up before ovulation. So if somebody is only tracking when they have their period and tracking their temperature, they see their temperature spike and then have all the sex, you've almost always missed your fertile window. Because let's say this gal, this example, ovulated on Wednesday. We saw her temperature go up on Thursday. That's how we know she ovulated sometime in the 24 hours before. So we don't have an indication it happened until Thursday. That 24-hour clock already started.
Yes.
So when we saw the temperature shift on Thursday and I saw that she hadn't had sex in a little bit, I said, you better go get busy. Like, you both work from home. Don't go to your next calls. Like, if you want a shot at this at all, you got to go do it right now. Because I don't know if she ovulated at 7 p.m. last night or at 7 a.m. the day before. And I'm messaging her like, we might be able to swing something here. So that's the other mistake I see, is that you over rely on the temperatures and you're unwilling to look for the cervical mucus. You think that's gross, or you just don't have enough information to know what to be looking for. And so as I say that, what I would like your audience to know is that it's as simple as maybe going to the bathroom before it's an emergency and you have to pee, giving yourself enough time to grab toilet paper and make it flat. So it's not an emergency, you haven't peed yet, and you wipe from front to back with the toilet paper. There's 2 things you need to pay attention to. What did it feel like? Did it feel wet or did it feel dry? If it felt wet, you have cervical mucus. If it felt dry, it's not right before you're going to ovulate. And feeling it dry is not a bad thing. You're just in a window of your cycle that your body's not revving up to ovulate. There will be more dry days than wet days. So it's not like you're failing if you see dry. But the sensation of the toilet paper, particularly between your vagina and your anus, where your pee comes out and your poop comes out, there's this little patch kind of leathery skin called your perineum. That typically can feel very lubricated when you have fertile cervical mucus. Then sometimes you can see it on the toilet paper. Sometimes you can see it even on your panties. And if you can see it and it's kind of globby, creamy, it's cervical mucus. It's not like the most peak, but it still could be fertile. If it's that stringy, you can pull it off the toilet paper, put it between your fingers. doesn't like break when you do this with your fingers, that's super fertile cervical mucus. And in PCOS cycles, especially if you have longer cycles, you may have multiple times you see fertile cervical mucus until your body actually is able to ovulate. So if you see 3 or 4 different periods of time where you have a couple days in a row with this really nice peak cervical mucus, I would encourage any of my clients trying to get pregnant to still have intercourse in those periods of time, and then confirm that you ovulate with your temp tracking, because that will tell you when it's like, okay, we can let off the pressure of having sex. But sometimes, especially at the beginning of working with someone when their cycle might be 60 or 90 days long, we might see 5 or 6 attempts at ovulation before it finally happens. And then as we work on things to improve their PCOS, we see their cycles shorten. And that's really helpful just to give you more chances at pregnancy. If you have a 60-day cycle, you might have 6 chances at ovulation in a year. If you have a 30-day cycle, you have closer to 12. And that just gives us more opportunities to get you pregnant. And in any given cycle, even with sex timed correctly, you have a 15 to 25% chance of pregnancy. So we want multiple cycles together in a row where we can confirm ovulation, we can confirm you had sex in a proper time to give you a really good shot at conception.
That is such good information. Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering, for those who are not trying to conceive, I feel like you touched on it a bit. What are the other benefits of cycle tracking besides identifying your fertile window?
Absolutely. One of the big ones is that you can avoid pregnancy. And we're talking like when you look at the data for people that are properly trained in fertility awareness method, you can avoid pregnancy with as much confidence as you can with something like a hormonal birth control. I mean, it gives you the ability to not have to rely on hormonal contraceptives to avoid pregnancy without having to um, maybe compromise your plans to try and manage your health a little bit more naturally without those hormones. And so, for some people, they don't want to risk it, and I've had clients that are like, until I see my temperature shift, we always use some sort of barrier method. So we'll use condoms, or we'll use a diaphragm, or we'll use some other type of um, way to avoid pregnancy, because after you ovulate, set a 24-hour clock, you cannot get pregnant. And women do not ovulate more than once in a cycle. The only time that that happens is if you ovulate at the same time 2 eggs, and that's people that get fraternal twins. So you're not going to ovulate on day 20 and then again ovulate on day 25. So that's one kind of scenario I've seen. Others that are really good at tracking their cervical mucus, when they're not having fertile cervical mucus, even prior to ovulation, you can have sex with confidence, knowing that it's not going to yield a pregnancy. I usually tell people you got to get to know your cycle a little bit before you can be that confident. You have to kind of get used to tracking, have a method for tracking, uh, have a backup option like condoms. I like to use a diaphragm because I just don't like condoms. And so that's something I had my midwives fit me for after I had babies. And we've used that very successfully to avoid pregnancy since. And then once I see ovulation occur and I, wait an extra 24 hours just to be sure, then I don't feel like we need to use the diaphragm anymore. So yeah, I think that it can, um, kinda give you some freedom in that regard. The other thing that fertility awareness method helps us do is I like to call it a cycle report card. It gives me a view into what is going on hormonally with you. Are your temperatures consistently really low even after you ovulate? Something's up with your thyroid. Um, After you ovulate, is it 9 days until your next period? Something's going on with that luteal phase, that second part of your cycle. And so it actually can help me track progress as we're making different changes. It can help me refer you to the right professional to make sure that we dig deeper if we're seeing that there's other things going on. Um, and it's really, I mean, a thermometer and some toilet paper and either an app or paper and a pen so that you can track things over time is all you really need. And I think that tracking things over time, I like to, when people are like, "Oh, this sounds like so much work," I'm like, "Hey, what'd you eat for lunch last Wednesday?" You're like, "Oh, what was I doing last Wednesday?" Like, it's really hard to remember. It's like, this is why we put it in an app or paper, because how do I rely on my memory of when I had cervical mucus and when my temp went up? I want information that I can see and refer back to. And then month after month, I can go, look at your cycle. Used to be 60 days. Now it's 45 days. Now it's 32 days. Look, you used to ovulate on day 45. Now you ovulate on day 16.
Mhm.
And so for somebody who maybe is trying to get pregnant and isn't seeing that positive pregnancy test yet, just that information can be really empowering. Like, this work that I'm doing, this effort I'm putting into improving my health is really translating into something, even though, it's not a positive pregnancy test yet.
Yeah. Lovely. So I feel like you've given us just a taste and you've already given us so much, but I know there's a lot more that you have to share. And how
Yeah.
and where do we learn more from you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I'm on Instagram. I try to post something every day at PCOS Fertility Nutrition. There's no dots or anything in there. You can find me there. I also have a free podcast that I do with my friend Sophia. It's called Food Freedom and Fertility. You can find that website, foodfreedomfertility.com, or we also have an Instagram that every we post like a preview of what's coming up. And actually, Kendra's coming up. We're releasing an episode we recorded with her. So after this comes out, and about a week from when this comes out. So that'll be dropping soon about yoga and its benefits for fertility. Um, so those are two ways. I take clients on one-on-one. I only hold like a client load of about 12 patients at any given time. So about 2 patients a month. Kind of as one patient stops working with me, I'll onboard somebody else, which really is kind of limiting. And so because of that, I created this method that I take patients through to help them establish what's going on in their cycle. I call that their personal baseline. What's going on with their cycle? What's going on with their hormones? What's going on with their symptoms? Um, we kind of take that information and interpret it, and then we build on that with consistent nourishment and supplementation and stress management, and then supporting partners' health. I have this method kind of collated into a 12-week online course called Find Fertility with the PCOS Plus method. And that enrolls at this point 3 times a year. We'll see what comes in 2021. But we have an enrollment until December 15th. If anybody watches this right away and wants to join, hop over to my Instagram, or you can go to PCOSfertilitynutrition.com/FF course, the Find Fertility course, and you can learn more about that. We're enrolling right now, and the ladies, I was telling Kendra before we hit record, like the support that women get from one another and kind of this community closed Facebook group that we have, I think is worth more than even the support and the education in the course, because it's just nice to have women kind of walking the walk with you, holding your hand, encouraging you when you're having a moment where you're having a hard time and you need to cry. Having somebody say, I get that, I'm living that too. There's a lot of power, I think, in that. And so that's available too, depending on when you're watching this. It may not be available for another few months, but that was also my answer to women around the world that, I'm
Mhm.
licensed healthcare practitioner in the United States. I can't take on one-on-one clients from Canada or the UK. And so this is a way to kind of access my expertise and my knowledge in a little bit of a DIY format, from anywhere. And where that you have an internet connection, you can get to the material.
Wonderful. I'll definitely link to all of that in the description box
Okay.
below. So
Yeah,
thank you for
awesome.
that.
Cool.
Again, thank you so
Yeah.
much for being here, Caitlin, and for sharing so much
Yeah.
valuable information information. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I leave your audience with one more thing?
Please, please.
There is so much hope. There's so much hope for managing your PCOS. If you're trying to get pregnant, there's so much hope for getting getting pregnant and having a healthy baby. When I was diagnosed, the doctor literally told me at diagnosis when I asked him what PCOS was that it's the number one reason in America why women can't get pregnant. And I want to flip the script on that for everyone because we are just not armed with the right information or the right tools to manage our PCOS naturally and just given prescriptions, which I'm thankful for, and they help some people, but they're not the solution for everyone. And there's so much more that women can do to take the reins of their health into their own hands, just given a little bit of information. And so I want people who have been years into the roads of infertility or just starting their journey to know there is so much hope to be had, and to find somebody like Kendra or myself or somebody local to you that really gets PCOS, if this is your goal, to hold your hand through this and help you, because it's very possible to get pregnant with PCOS.